said in this, they're like, jazz. These kids and their jazz music.
So scandalous.
What was the last one of those? I think there's jazz, then everyone was against rock. Was hip-hop the last one?
I think hip-hop, like rap.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you look at it, you look at jazz, rock and roll, hip-hop, really it's just white Americans being scared of black people.
Oh, yeah.
That's all that was.
Yikes.
Yeah. Well, we really cracked it.
Well,
I don't really want to get into all of that now. Let's just start this podcast.
Here we are, podcasting.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of I Love This, You Should Too. I am one of your hosts, the adequate Mr. Randhawa. And with me is my lovely co-host, the lovely Mrs. Randhawa.
Oh, that's me.
We never really are introduced as Mr. and Mrs. Randhawa.
I'm
Feels weird.
occasionally referred to as Mrs. Randhawa.
Oh, since I stopped teaching, I'm never like Mr. Randhawa anymore.
Oh. To me, Mrs. Randhawa is your mom, though.
But my mom's never been called Mrs. Randhawa either.
In my brain, she is Mrs. Randhawa. And that I am just Mrs. Randhawa Jr. The younger.
Mrs. Randhawa Jr. Yeah, there's no real Mrs. Randhawas in my families because my sisters, some of them changed their names, and then the ones who didn't are Dr. Randhawa.
Oh, true. Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of Mrs. Randhawa.
No, I'm happy to carry the banner.
Good job.
With your mom.
Wait, we were starting to do the
podcast.
podcast and not get into other stuff.
Yes.
We are going to be talking all about the 1999 film, The Talented Mr. Ripley, today. It was my pick. It was a movie that I saw when I was probably in my late teens, somewhere around then, not too long after it came out, and I remember really loving it. And I remember really loving the soundtrack. I had a CD of the soundtrack. I liked it that much. And you know what? Soundtrack holds up. And I'm going to say the movie holds up. But it was my pick, but it was new for Samantha, the talented Mrs. Randhawa. So, as the title would suggest, Sam, I loved this movie. Did you?
I loved it.
It was good, huh?
Yeah, no, it was fun. It had... Like, you were right when you, introduced the movie to me last week.
Mm-hmm.
You were right. It has all the things that I look for in, books.
Yes.
And there was, a romance. There was fancy rich people. There was boats. It was great.
But then it also had a lot of those things that I look for in movies, like nihilism, the questioning of the very notion of identity, and it was overall a very dark movie, but you wouldn't know it from the first 30 minutes.
Yeah, I really loved the ride of this film.
I'm glad to hear that. It's been a while since you've loved one of the movies I suggested. You're always like, yeah, it's fine.
It's nice.
Although I think this is the first American movie I've done in a long time.
Oh.
We were kind of all over the place with Korean and Japanese, and then we had a Canadian Content Week. And the first American movie I pick in a while is, of course, not set in America, but it is full of Americans and was an American production. And I think it's maybe our third or fourth movie that I've picked from the year 1999. Because, again, greatest
Golden
year in
age
American...
of film.
The single year of American filmmaking, I think the greatest one was 1999.
Wow. Yeah. I like the movies we've watched from 1999, so I'm going to agree with you.
Although I think you had mixed feelings on Being John Malkovich.
Yes, correct.
Oh, so good. But we're not talking about that. Let's get into The Talented Mr. Ripley. Full disclosure, I hate when podcasters or anyone apologizes for what they're about to do, but I think I'm heat-stroked, and my mind is wandering, and I'm having trouble concentrating. And I didn't really do notes, but I still think we are going to deliver some quality content.
Excellent.
But rather than going through chronologically, which we do for movies that we tend not to like, or going thematically, which I often like to do, I think this, because it's more of a character study than anything else. I think we should talk about this movie in characters and really getting into the psychology and the character development of Matt Damon's portrayal of Tom Ripley really will be breaking down the movie as well.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it, because I feel like if we go chronologically, we're going to miss some of that, like, insightfulness.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, you should have seen the movie already, so you just go watch that. And if it's one of these movies that's kind of a convoluted plot, not in a bad way, but there's a lot to the plot, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of happenstance and luck and lying and all that kind of stuff. Going over the plot is not fun. Like, that's what the movie is for. So I think maybe we'll start off with a little introduction of just overall what we liked, what we were surprised about, and then maybe we'll go through the characters, because I think the strength of this movie is those performances. I think there's a lot of very good performances in this, and maybe we'll end up with Tom Ripley, and that will probably lead us to how we feel about the movie overall.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
We already know the things you liked about it. Were there any things that were surprising to you about this one?
I guess one thing I was surprised about was just how layered Matt Damon was as Tom Ripley. I really appreciated his performance, and his ability to do impersonations is incredible.
Because a lot of the actors that I like, you've seen them later in their career where they're almost like jokes of themselves, or they turn into action stars.
Right.
Which is one of the two ways most of my beloved childhood actors go. I was like a teenager at this time, so it wasn't exactly a childhood thing. But do you think of Matt Damon as, the talented young actor Matt Damon, or he's more just like movie star Matt Damon?
I think movie star Matt Damon.
So what are some like movies that you would think of Matt Damon from? Or is he not someone who's really on your radar that much?
Like, I know that he was in Good Will Hunting, but I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Wasn't he in like a Bond type film?
He had all those Jason Bourne movies.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I just couldn't remember. I knew it was a B, but all I could think was Bond.
Yeah, so I think to most of the world now, that's who he is.
Yeah.
And a lot of all of the actors in this is kind of when they were getting big. It's not like this was their breakthrough, because Matt Damon, I think, already has an Oscar for writing Good Will Hunting. I think Blanchett maybe already has an Oscar. Gwyneth Paltrow definitely has one from the previous year for Shakespeare in Love.
Oh.
Philip Seymour Hoffman is gonna get an Oscar in the next couple of years, or at least some more nominations. Jude Law as well. Maybe he wasn't as big as I think, but I was a very big Jude Law fan. And I loved him in this as well. But it's a handful of actors who have all gone on to have huge careers, and this is relatively early, but when they were all kind of known as like, oh, this is the next big thing, and they already were that next big thing.
Right. Oh, the Ocean's movies. Those are like the other ones that I know of him.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Which was like an ensemble cast of just like superstars. So
yeah,
I feel like that's how I see him.
He's a superstar.
Yeah.
And we forget that a lot of the times with those superstar actors, they were just actors, right? There are people who are just movie stars. They kind of skipped that step of being a good actor. Like if you get your big breaks in action movies or something like that, sometimes you are not always the greatest actor before you become a like capital MS movie star. But Damon, I would say, is just a talented actor, and we see that here.
Oh, yeah. After seeing this, I'm like, I can see why he's famous. Like, I can see it. And he had such a varied kind of character that it was really interesting to see him kind of embrace all those parts of his characters. And I have a hard time imagining him, like, breaking character on set. This seems like it's such a huge character that you kind of have to just like be in it all the time.
Right.
Like it would be really hard to like take that off and put it back on.
One of the biggest things that was surprising to me on this rewatch, because I haven't seen it in, I guess, like a decade, more, 2 decades? I don't know, because I have no concept of time. But was how light the tone is to start.
Yeah.
Because I knew where the movie was going. So when you start off with the movie, you're like, oh, this seems like a fun kind of romp. It seems like one of those 50s madcap romps, like your charade and those types of things, in how it was edited with those kind of pieces coming up. I'd seen that in a lot of 50s caper movies. And then you have the music that often accompanies Ripley when he's doing some of his, Ripley business, some of his lying or deceit or whatever. It's not particularly ominous music. Instead, it's that fun Pink Panther-esque type music. So you think like, oh, he's up to something fun. And for a long time, he is. I guess we'll talk about why I think that that's effective in making him relatable at first, and then you get brought along on this ride that you did not bargain for. And that's kind of the strength of the movie. But it was so much lighter and so fun for the first while.
Yeah, when you'd introduced it to me as this like dark, twisty, turny, like scary movie with a little bit of murder, at the beginning I was like, is this a romantic comedy? Because like I don't understand how we're gonna like transition to dark, twisty, turny murder film. And it did.
And then when it happened, how did you feel?
I was like, here it is.
And were you along for that journey, or did you feel that was kind of jarring? Or
no, I was along. I was kind of immersed at that point. I think it wasn't too like stark.
And the structure was very surprising to me because, you know, I'm someone who always pays attention to the structure of a movie. And in this one, the act structure was strange because Dickie dies less than halfway into the movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, now what? And I kind of forgot everything after that. But I didn't feel like it lagged. I do think the first hour is so much more fun and is so enjoyable. But the second hour is still good. And I feel like the pacing and the tension of it still keeps you with it. Yeah,
I think like Ripley at the beginning is so interesting to like try and get to know that kind of pulled me in. I was like, who is this guy who's like lying about Princeton? He's like scamming his way into a trip to Europe.
He's
like
just yes-anding his
who
way to
is this guy? And so then I was kind of hooked at that point.
And who is this guy? We'll save it.
Okay, great. I was like, I'm not prepared for that question.
Another thing I mentioned already, I love the score of this movie.
Oh, it's beautiful.
First, like all the jazz, which is great, not because I'm a huge jazz fan, although I like a good bit, but it just sets the time and place very well. And then the score, which has some jazziness to it at times, but the score is fantastic. And then you have those themes like that Sinead O'Connor song at the beginning, that kind of eerie, creepy one that comes in and out at some points when things get like actually serious. And just all of it. I think it's one of my maybe not favorite scores, but you think of those like big giant scores.
Yeah.
This is a good example of a score where maybe you're not going to be singing the tunes afterwards, but it is fantastic. And I think, well, of course I think because I bought the CD, but I think you can just sit and listen to this score, the whole soundtrack.
You were playing it this week a little bit here and there, and I definitely think it's a nice score just to listen to, but the way it works in with the movie is kind of magical. Like they did a really good job with it. Like you feel like you're in Italy.
Yeah, and it was just shot beautifully and directed amazingly well as well. Because the director, whose name I'm sure you'll tell me because you have it in front of you, Anthony Minghella?
Yeah.
He had, I think, just come off The English Patient. I don't know why I don't just pull up IMDb for all of this because I'm talking about, then they won an Oscar next year. I should have just looked it up. But he had just at least been nominated for Best Director. I think had won it. And he was just making hits.
Yeah.
Him, Damon, Blanchett, Paltrow, Jude Law, all of them were doing such good work at the time. And I believe Anthony Minghella died quite soon after this and young, so we didn't get to see I would have been very interested to see what he would have done, because this wasn't a movie where I'm like, wow, the director, that's like a real trademark style and I can pick him out, but it's just so wonderfully directed.
Yeah, I think the choices that he made, I can like appreciate the look and the feel and the way that he directed the camera.
So do you want to get into some character studies and talk about performances and our favorite characters?
Yes, please.
Who should we start with?
Maybe Dickie?
Oh, let's go Dickie. I was going to say, I wanted you to tell me who's the most attractive person in this movie.
Oh, I think Gwyneth Paltrow or Kate
Paltrow.
Blanchett.
And then?
Jude Law, probably.
And then?
Matt Damon.
I'd go Jude Law number 1.
Uh-huh.
Maybe Blanchett 2?
She's gorgeous.
Paltrow 3.
Damon 4.
Damon 4.
Huh.
Oh, I forgot about that character towards the end. But I guess maybe he'd be 5.
Oh, Jack Davenport?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'd put him as 5. He was like handsome.
Very handsome.
But
he's no Jude Law.
He's no Jude
Who
Law.
is?
I've had a crush on Jude Law for many years.
I feel like I've had a Jude Law crush longer than you.
Probably. You've seen a lot of Jude Law stuff that I probably haven't.
Around this time, like, I know Existence wasn't great, but he did this, and Gattaca is so underrated. He was a sex machine, I think maybe the next year in AI.
Interesting.
I like Jude Law a lot. I think he's very good.
Yeah, I have really only seen him as like a romantic comedy lead.
No, once upon a time, he was a good actor.
Yeah.
But let's talk Dickie.
Let's talk Dickie.
Dickie Greenleaf. Herbert Richard Greenleaf Jr., I think is his full name. Played by Jude Law, and I think he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this, but didn't win. How'd you like his performance?
I liked it. I think he did that like rich kid with like oodles of money who doesn't understand how real life works.
The poor little rich boy.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm so rich. I wish I didn't have all of this money, but I'm so dependent on all of this money.
Yeah. And the like not understanding A, the plight of like people who don't have money, and B, just like how people navigate the world when you can't just throw like a stack of cash at it.
Right.
Like figuring out plane tickets or like figuring out food and like stuff like that. It was just really interesting to kind of see him compared to Ripley, because they clearly come from very different worlds.
And he had such a, people always say magnetic performances, and I was like, that doesn't mean anything. But I think this was a magnetic performance because he attracts everyone to him. And Marge, I like that Gwyneth Paltrow's name is Marge.
I was like, that's such a 1950s name.
Marge puts it very well when she's talking to Tom Ripley about how he's like the sun. When he's shining on you, you love it and you just crave it. But when he's not, it's dark and it's cold and you're alone and you just want that again. Mm-hmm. But he's fickle. He's going from one thing to the next. He doesn't care about you as much as you care about him.
Right.
And they both kind of bonded almost about that because they both experienced that.
Yeah, exactly. His performance also very layered, but at the same time very one-faceted.
Yeah, it seemed true to life. Mm-hmm. It's not like he was going over the top of like, look at this douchebag, but he's like, yeah, he's kind of a dick.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a terrible person.
No.
But he's not a good person.
I think it's also just like a consequence of his circumstance that he's kind of like a dick.
But he also cheats on his fiance, gets someone pregnant, and then just kind of shuns her and she kills herself. Mm-hmm. So he's pretty bad.
Yeah, he's pretty bad.
But that's kind of the balancing act that this movie does. Not to say that like, oh, he was bad there, but he's charming, so it's okay. It's kind of making you try to reconcile that. You're like, I too want to be Dickie Greenleaf's friend, but he's also a piece of shit. Yeah. And it makes you try to like deal with that and makes you reckon with like, oh, why do I like him?
Yeah.
Is it just because he's good looking? And why is he so charming to me?
And like access to things that you might not get.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting narrative of like people with money and their like hangers on.
Yeah, and maybe it kind of makes you think about these movie stars or different characters in movies that you're like, yeah, why do I like that person so much? Mm-hmm.
One thing I found really interesting was Dickie talking about Princeton and how Ripley couldn't have attended Princeton because he's like not like the people he knows at Princeton or who went to Princeton.
But he means it kind of as a compliment at that
Yeah,
point. Yeah,
because he's like, no, you're like actually smart. Princeton's just full of like rich douchebags who are there because their parents paid for them to be there.
like Freddie.
Like Freddie.
I think Dickie's also a really interesting parallel to Ripley because both of them, if you ask, like, who are they? What are their characteristics? It's hard to give anything that is more than superficial. Because Ripley we'll talk about later, but he kind of doesn't have a personality. He mirrors the personality of others. But Dickie has kind of grown up in this world too, where that's almost a strength, and he's trying to get away from that. But who is he really? He's rebelling against something, and he likes jazz. But what does he really want? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a flaw in the writing. I think that's an interesting parallel in those two characters and how, coming from different places, similar characteristics are either positive or negative, depending on your past.
And I think Dickie is so rich that he doesn't need to want anything. Like, there's nothing in his life that he can't have. And so I think that's the opposite for Tom, is that he wants everything.
Yeah, and he has nothing.
Yeah, and he has no
internally or like financially.
Yeah, and his only way of getting things is by kind of manipulating the system.
I think another mirror to that is Cate Blanchett's performance as Meredith. Because Meredith also has that poor little rich girl thing, and she has that one line about, well, it's so hard being rich, but I don't want to hang out with anyone who's not rich because they don't know how hard it is to be rich. And you're just like, fuck you.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, she has no like malice to her at all. That's truly what she believes.
Yeah, I liked her. She seemed very innocent, and I think that might have thrown Ripley a little bit because she's like very pure and innocent, and maybe he hasn't seen a lot of that, and that might trip up his like morals of, you know, tricking people and getting what he wants.
Yeah, she has a lot of parallels with Dickie as well, because they're both people who come from money and claim they don't want the money, but still use all of that money all the time. And this seems like a lot of these characters, I'm thinking about them and like, oh, maybe they're not that great. But that's not the case. I think it is intentional, just like, oh, you know what it is now? I see a lot of Hemingway. It's like The Sun Also Rises. These characters who go to Italy to like try to like, oh, we're going to find something. It was like Hemingway's Lost Generation, those people between the two world wars who were like, what do we have to live for? And they're like, oh, yeah, we're just going to go to other countries and spend our money. And he wrote about them as like almost a condemnation at times. And it seems like this movie is also kind of following in that too, because both Dickie and Meredith are just kind of coasting and floating around, really, right? They're not there for a reason. They're not in Italy to do something. And I think you could even read into it saying that Dickie coming to Italy, getting someone pregnant, and then just abandoning her is kind of representative of how a lot of the world sees Americans and how Americans see other cultures. They go to a place, or they take that culture, they use it for their own amusement, and then when they're done, they just like toss it away, and they don't have to follow through with that. And I think Dickie's time in Italy is kind of a commentary on that, perhaps.
Yeah, that wasteful culture.
And Meredith, again, I don't know much about her. She seems like someone who is looking for something, but she doesn't know what she's looking for. And a lot of the time, she's almost in the movie more as a plot device. She furthers the plot a lot, so you get why she's in it for those reasons. But there's still something about her performance that I just loved her. I loved when she was on screen. I actually haven't seen many Cate Blanchett movies, but she was just fantastic in the small amount of work she was doing in this.
And I think that she is still a very good actress.
Yes.
Like, as she's gotten older and done more work and stuff, I think she's still very, very good, and she's very versatile.
Yeah, for sure.
In the things that she's done, and I think that she is pretty incredible.
For whatever reason, she always seems old to me. Not like an old lady.
No.
But it was almost bizarre to see her as like young, vibrant Kate Blanchett.
Yeah.
She just seems like perpetually old. And that sounds bad, but maybe she is just such a mature and nuanced actor that I don't think of her as like gallivanting around Italy type person.
Yeah, and like carefree. I feel like a lot of the stuff that she does is very serious too.
Yes.
So, and especially now. But I think that this is kind of opposite because she's just like flitting around Europe and like getting into trouble.
How many of the actors in this are in the Marvel universe? Kate Blanchett was. She was Thor's sister? Jude Law was. He was in Captain Marvel, I believe.
Oh. Gwyneth Paltrow.
She's Pepper Potts. Is
Yeah.
Matt Damon?
I don't know.
It's probably just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And if Philip Seymour Hoffman were still alive, I bet he'd be one of the agents or something.
He was in Thor Ragnarok.
Matt Damon was?
He played an Asgardian man playing the role of Loki in
that's
a play
right.
going
Yes.
on in the movie.
Yeah, he totally was. Kate Blanchett was in that one too, I think. Or was she in a different Thor? It doesn't matter. We're not talking MCU, but I forgot about that scene, and that scene was hilarious.
Yeah.
I really liked that. I like Matt Damon a lot because he is also willing to make fun of himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't take himself very seriously, and I like that about him.
That's kind of what I think of him as now. Is like a comedic jokey kind of actor.
Similar to Brad Pitt in a lot of ways. They both were very good actors, achieved the superstardom, and now often do things that are almost commentaries on their own careers. Mm-hmm. They have like a certain self-reflexivity about that.
Yeah.
And in a smaller performance, we have Philip Seymour Hoffman playing Freddy, and I love Philip Seymour Hoffman. R.I.P.
So I have a really hard time with him.
The character or the actor?
The actor.
Okay.
The actor playing the character, I guess, because to me, Philip Seymour Hoffman is like 60.
60?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. He's
just like me and Kate Blanchett, I
He's
guess.
like an older actor to me. And so him being with Matt Damon and Jude Law and being that age that they are supposed to be like early 20s in that movie, I just think like he did a great performance, but it was just really hard for me to like fit him into that cast.
Interesting.
I don't know. He's just...
What do you know what you've seen him in that makes you think of him as an older actor?
No, I can't think of a movie that makes me think of him, but he does just seem older. I don't have a good reason for it.
I guess that's the exact same thing I was saying about Kate Blanchett. I just always think of her as an older actor, and she's not. She was young. I loved so many of Philip Seymour Hoffman's movies, and he is fantastic in this. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I hated him so much.
He's so bad.
I just wanted to punch him in the face every time he spoke.
And he also seemed like there was something seedy going on behind the scenes there.
I guess not as seedy as what's going on behind
Ripley's scenes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
I think it wasn't behind the scenes. I think he's just like he's just a piece of shit, and he was very willing to admit that.
Yeah.
And is kind of proud of it, it seemed like.
Yeah, I think he's like in a lot of movies about like rich people, there's always the guy who gets the stuff, right? So if it's like a party or like drugs or alcohol or women or like whatever, I feel like that's who Philip Seymour Hoffman was. He's like the one who makes the good time happen.
And he does such a good job at being the character that sums up how this elite world sees someone like Tom Ripley. You can just hear him talking about like, oh, he's wearing that same coat again. Mm-hmm. And that whole thing, or the Tommy, how's the peeping?
Yeah, that was...
bit. And he just keeps saying it, or when he comes in and he's like playing the key on the piano and just like looking at him. and hitting that off key.
Yeah.
I don't know how he didn't kill him right then.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to.
Yeah, that was a pretty harsh juxtaposition to like everyone else in this movie of him. He's just like, he knows how to push buttons, and he's just a dick because he can be a dick.
And he just revels in it. He loves being an asshole. For the small amount of screen time he had, I think him and Blanchett like really stole a lot of scenes. I mean, Blanchett, it's probably harder to say that because she wasn't a big performance. I just found her just infinitely watchable.
Oh, yeah.
And with Hoffman, I just found him infinitely hateable. So those two are going to draw a lot of attention from me.
So Gwyneth Paltrow is Marge. I thought her performance was just like incredible. I thought she was like, I keep saying layered. She was very layered or something. But she just like really brought some like realness to the characters, where like Jude Law isn't like really a real person because he's rich and he has no cares or like wants in this world. Gwyneth Paltrow is like, she's a novelist and she is like a true human being. But
she also, I'm not saying that the performance wasn't good, but she also is there because she's rich. Yeah. She can afford to just be doing whatever. And with her, though, she's like, oh, I'm writing a novel. I don't know if she's really writing that novel. I don't know if that novel is complete garbage. But it didn't seem that far from Dickie being like, oh, I'm here to see jazz. Like, okay, whatever you need to tell yourself. You're just rich and hanging out in Italy. Yeah. And that is what she was doing. But she is just a character who actually has sympathy for others. She is like and the humanity. Maybe that the only character who has sympathy for others in this whole movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she comes across as like almost motherly a lot of the time, but it's mostly because she's dealing with Dickie, who is a child. Yeah. And Tom Ripley, who may or may not have emotions.
Yeah, maybe that's why she feels like she's like the most human out of everybody.
Oh, from the most human, I would definitely agree with. For the first half of the movie, I thought she was a bit one note. And not saying that it was a bad performance, but the character, that's kind of what she was doing. And when she kind of expands into her own person as she starts becoming concerned with where Dickie is, and then getting to the point of accusing Tom of doing something, I think that's when her performance really starts to become more multifaceted like that.
Yeah, it was interesting to see her character progress, and I thought she did such an incredible job in that scene where they're getting on the boat in, was it Rome? Or Venice?
Towards the end of the movie?
Towards the end of the movie, when Greenleaf is like taking her home, basically. Dickie Sr. And
Big Dick.
No.
Herbert.
And her like outburst there is just like, it was like heart-wrenching. Because she's grieving a real person, and she's staring at someone that she is convinced has killed that person that she's grieving, and nobody is taking a moment to like listen to her side of the story. And you can tell she just feels like lost and small, and
she's kind of just dismissed as being hysterical, right? It's the 50s, you're a grieving woman, what do you know?
Women be crazy.
And she's just not listened to, and she knows what's actually happening.
Yeah. And so that little scene where they basically like put her on the boat was just so moving and good, because she is having like a real human reaction to something in a movie where a lot of people don't have reactions that are kind of appropriate.
Right. Yeah, she is kind of the human core of this movie in a lot of ways. Upon this watch, I didn't love the performance as much as maybe the other ones we've talked about. And maybe I'm being too harsh on Paltrow, but I'm not saying it's bad by any stretch. I just remember at the time loving Gwyneth Paltrow. And we've seen her in other things, and I still think she was fantastic. I think she was very good before she was whatever kind of cult leader she is now. She was another one. Like, so many of these people have gotten so big that you forget that there was a talented performer in there at one point.
Yeah.
It was probably Shakespeare in Love that like really did it for me as a teenager watching that, thinking that was a great performance. But I think, as good as she was in that scene, what I liked is when she was talking to Tom, because she was the only person at many times that would talk to Tom as a human, as a person, as an equal. He got so little of that, and he does not reciprocate for her because she's an obstacle to him.
Yeah.
She's the Marge problem to
Yeah.
him. So she's still not even getting anything from him. But when she was talking about Jude Law in the scene that I was talking about earlier, like when he shines on you, everything is great and warm, but when he's gone, it's so cold. You can see that she knows about all the other stuff that Dickie is up to, because she's talking about how all these people want to be with him, and then she goes, and that's just the guys.
Yeah.
So she knows what he's doing, and she is still kind of a prisoner to her affection towards him, because despite all of that, she still loves him. She shouldn't.
Yeah.
But you can't blame the person for loving the wrong person.
Yeah.
You can't blame the victim. Dickie's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Sure, she should know better, but she doesn't. And you can't, like, justify not loving or loving someone. It's hard to control, right? So you have to be on her side in that. And how she is playing this kind of defeated person earlier on in the movie. Someone who knows that the person she loves will never love her the way she loves him. That part, I thought, had some good nuance to it and was pretty sad.
Yeah. Her whole speech about Dickie being like the sun and you just wanting to like be around it, and we're like, this is the life that you want.
Yeah.
Like this is what you've chosen to like fill your time with. And it was very, very sad. And it does like ring true of like just like a bad relationship and her like not wanting anything better for herself.
And I think that's a major theme of the movie too, is how a charismatic person, they feel like their existence is the reward. And that is perpetuated by people around them. 'Cause Dickie's a piece of shit.
He is.
Everyone loves him. And watching the movie, there's times where I loved him.
Yeah. Oh no, he looked like someone that you could have a drink with and it would be very fun.
Yeah, and I think that's some of the brilliance of the commentary of this movie, is getting you to root for someone like that.
Yeah.
Getting you to love someone like that, and then be like, why? Why do you love this person? Why does she love this person? Why do we? Charisma. And this movie is a lot about that, about Tom not having that and wanting it, and just essentially mirroring how other people do it, and realizing that that is value.
Yeah.
Having people like you is value. And we get to see Dickie is the epitome of that through much of the movie, and Marge's relation to him is an example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of themes in this movie that also make you look kind of back at yourself of like, would you be any better in that situation?
Right.
Like when he calls him a leech.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought like, yeah, like tell him he is leeching off of him. But then I'm like, wouldn't I do the same thing if I met somebody who had like $500 million and just was spending it freely on his
you're
people?
like, it's nothing to you and it's everything to me.
Yeah.
The time he spent, the money he spent was nothing to him, but it was everything to Tom. And it seems like it was everything to Marge as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But she was just less needy than Tom.
Yeah, it's interesting. The lessons, I guess, in this movie. That might be the wrong word, but like just the things that makes you think about yourself as well when you're judging these characters, and then you kind of turn it back on yourself and you're like, no, you would have done the same thing.
And I think that's what I like about so many of these movies, when I always talk about like, oh yeah, this has the things that I like, but it doesn't have that extra level. That's that kind of extra level that I like to talk about, is how does it make you reflect upon yourself? What does it say about the world in general? And I think this says a lot about class structures and social stratification and how that affects things. I think the movie makes a lot of good points about that too.
Yeah.
Shall we try to break down the talented Mr. Ripley?
Oh my goodness. That seems like a impossible task. But yeah.
I don't know. I don't know where to even start.
No.
So it starts with his narration.
Mm-hmm.
And from some of the movies we've watched and movies from the 50s, this is someone telling a story. So you get to feel like the voiceover is usually the truth, right? They're not going to lie in a voiceover. They're lying to everyone, but they're not going to lie to us.
Mm-hmm.
So that sets it up. And he starts off with, if I could go back, I would take it back.
Mm-hmm.
It all started with borrowing that jacket.
Right.
And I love that it did. He's not just saying that. There is a lot of coincidence, sure, but there is such a quick slope that he slides down after borrowing that jacket. I think one thing I want to talk about is whether or not we think that Tom is out to manipulate people. Is he out to do a scheme, or does he fall into it?
Yeah, I think he falls into it.
I think initially he falls into it because I don't think he didn't have any sort of plan. He was just playing the piano, and then someone goes, "Oh, you go to Princeton?" And he's like, "Yeah." He just yes-ands his way into a trip to Italy.
Yeah.
And I don't fault him at that point for anything. I was like, yeah, go for it. I would do the exact same thing. If these Richies are going to send you to Italy and you're someone who... He's a piano tuner. He's never going to be able to travel there on his own, and especially not in the first class way that he goes.
Yeah.
So I don't fault him for going along with things at all. And I think that's interesting on the writing side of things because it makes you sympathize or perhaps empathize with Ripley. So you're on his side now. And I like movies that put you on someone's side because at the beginning of this movie, I'm on Ripley's side. Mm-hmm. He's just some guy who's working hard, loves playing the piano, doesn't get breaks in life. We don't get to see a lot of his past, but he's not living in a great place. Mm-hmm. So we know that he's not particularly well off financially, and he's not going to have the same opportunities. And we get to see a character like Dickie who has everything he could want, but doesn't do anything with that. Then we see Tom, who has so little and is trying to make the best out of it. Mm-hmm. So of course I'm on Tom's side. And I like when movies put you on someone's side and then you decide when you turn.
Right.
Like, how far do you go being on that person's side before you go like, oh, no, you're the bad guy. Yeah. I'm not on your side.
Yeah, I was on his side. And then I got a little bit shaken when he starts doing the impressions. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, maybe this guy's just like not good and I shouldn't be cheering for him. And then Dickie just finds him amusing.
Yeah.
And then he slowly gets like more and more bogged down in this life. And then all of a sudden I came to the realization that, yeah, he's not a good guy.
Before he kills Dickie?
Yeah, as he's kind of coming to the realization that that's what he needs to do.
When do you think he comes to that realization?
Probably when Jude Law is like saying, like, you're a leech, you need to go, and like is trying to kick him out of his life, basically.
I think that he never intends to kill Dickie.
No?
No, because when Dickie starts hitting him first, mm-hmm. and Ripley is cowering and is terrified, mm-hmm. and Dickie like keeps berating him, or maybe he's not even hitting him at that point, but he snaps and hits him once with the oar.
Yeah.
And his reaction, which I believe is truthful, is immediate regret and concern. Mm-hmm. I don't think he had intention to kill Dickie.
Oh.
I think he hit him and then he's like, oh shit. He tries to stop him. And then he tries to like stop the bleeding. And then Dickie leaps on him. And then he pushes him off and hits him. And then he just doesn't stop.
Yeah. And he's like, I need to finish this now.
I think he didn't intend to kill Dickie. And I think he regrets killing Dickie. I'm not saying he's a good guy or anything. He killed him. But I think that it was a crime of passion than anything premeditated.
Yeah, I could see that being true.
Because he just looked so scared.
Mm-hmm.
Ripley does.
Yeah, there's a few points in this movie where he is very childlike.
Usually around water.
Yeah.
He's scared of water.
Is he?
When he first gets to the beach, he takes off his shoes and he runs to the water, puts his feet in it, and turns around.
Yeah.
When everyone else is swimming off of the boat, he sits and is reading his book.
Mm-hmm.
When Dickie is on the boat with him, just the two of them, he's scared and says like, no, stop it. I'm serious. He's scared of water, I think. I tried to like psychoanalyze because that's what we're going to do here. And I was like, the classic, when you gaze into the abyss, it gazes back into you. The ocean is emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a reflection of Ripley's own emptiness, is my hypothesis.
Oh.
So when he sees that, the scariest thing to him is his own emptiness. And that comes back later in the movie. He feels like he is nothing. He's nobody. And that's a theme that comes up a lot. And he tries to create this personality, this whole self. Everything about him is invented. And it's usually done so by mirroring other people. He doesn't have a self. I don't think Tom Ripley is anyone. We're going to watch American Psycho at one point, and that's kind of my idea there too, and how that is like part of corporate culture. Just like being nobody is kind of good.
Yes.
Being an empty vessel. And I think he is that. So the vast ocean is a reflection of that, and him being scared of the water is him being scared to face his own emptiness.
Whoa, man.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I just made that all up, but it seems to make sense to me a little bit.
Made sense to me.
So then do you think he was a killer just waiting to happen? Or do you think he kills out of necessity or circumstance?
I think he's telling himself he has to kill out of necessity. I think he's just like a psychopath.
I think I'd agree with you. I'm not saying that if he had never gone on this trip, maybe he would never kill anyone. I think that's a definite possibility. Mm-hmm. But I also think like he might. I think he is neither good nor evil. I think he has no morals because he is largely empty.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I think that emptiness is like what psychopaths.
Yes.
It's where the conscience goes.
Yeah.
And I think that he doesn't want to deal with that because that means he's a bad person. And like you said, he thinks he's a good person who is like helping people.
Tom?
I
disagree with that. I don't think he thinks he's a good person. I think he is aware of that he is nothing. Mm-hmm. And that is what he's trying to get away from. And the only ways he knows how to do this are to please others. I think he tries to be a people pleaser much of the time. Mm-hmm. But I think he doesn't know why he's doing that. I think he pleases others just to fit in. He wants to feel wanted, but he brings nothing to the table.
Right.
So the only way he knows is like trying to do what people ask for him, which makes him great for the roles that he is in when the movie is starting. Like when Greenleaf Sr. meets him, he loves him. He's like, oh, this kid is going places. This kid is great. And I was trying to think like, why? What is it about him? But all Ripley does is mirror what he sees in others.
Yeah.
And Greenleaf Sr. is like a corporate guy. It's shipping, I think.
Shipping,
that
yeah.
He's essentially a billionaire. I guess not in those days, but what would now be a billionaire. Yeah. That's a fun little comparison too, because if Ripley was Greenleaf Jr., was Dickie, mm-hmm. because he talks about him like, you're wasting everything you have, what I would do with what you have. He would do so well mm-hmm. in a corporate structure. Like how CEOs, so many of them are sociopaths or psychopaths, but that's like a very productive place for a psychopath is in business.
Yes.
And that's not just me hating rich people. That's an actual thing.
Yes, exactly.
Happened. And he would do so well. If he were Dickie, he would just please his father and have no scruples about going about his business. Mm-hmm. And he would be incredibly successful. I don't know much about Greenleaf Sr. He doesn't seem to have a lot of empathy for others.
No.
He's kind of dismissive about his own son being missing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he cares enough to come out there, but it seems like he cares about how it reflects on him.
Yeah, he's caring about like the optics of his son leaving a suicide note.
So then you wonder if Tom Ripley was in that position, he would act kind of like Greenleaf Sr. And that makes me think like that's why he loves that guy.
Yeah.
He's a perfect son for you, for someone in that world.
Yeah, I agree with you in that he would be really good at business with that. I feel like that's what business people want their underlings to be, is like, don't bring your emotions to work.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about like the morals of this, and like just be a good worker drone.
Do what you can to please me.
Yeah.
I have authority. And that's exactly what Tom Ripley would be.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think there are many situations where he would do really well, but this like really emotionally charged situation isn't as easy for him.
Definitely.
Yeah. You see him kind of struggle with people who are emoting really hard.
Yeah.
Like Meredith and like Marge. And I was just thinking about the moment in the carriage with Meredith when he's like basically breaking up with her.
Yes.
And she's sitting there crying in the carriage, and he's like, well, I'll see you tomorrow for coffee.
He doesn't care about her.
No. And he doesn't care about emotions. It seems like he's not able to read that she's like really upset and could actually use him to like comfort her.
Do you think he cares about Dickie?
I felt a little bit like he loved Dickie and wanted to like be around him forever.
Yeah, it's a fine line. Does he want to be Dickie or does he want to be with him?
Yeah.
And I think that he is a character that is so emotionally stunted that he can't differentiate.
Yeah.
So I read it as Tom Ripley is gay. He may not have known it, or he might be asexual. Who knows?
Yeah.
I do hate how often evil characters would be gay coded, because then you're like, yeah, he's a bad guy, he's gay.
Yeah.
That was the thing that happened so much. And I don't think this falls into it in the same way, because I think although he might be, I don't think that is linked with his homicidal tendencies. Maybe I think there is a chance that maybe he is a psychopath, and when he found himself attracted to Dickie, he doesn't know what to do with that.
Right.
He's never been attracted to someone. He's never been in love. He's never had all of these emotions. So now that he's having them, he doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know, like, am I in love with this man, or do I want to be this man?
Yeah.
And he just goes like, yeah, all of it. I just want him. I
'Cause,
want to
there's
be
like a
him. I want to become him. I want to be with him.
There's like a strong argument for both.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I agree with you that he doesn't know because he's never experienced this kind of human interaction.
Yes. I don't think he has the emotional intelligence to parse this out. And especially if you're in the 50s, you're probably, I think this character has had no sexual interactions in his life, and finding yourself sexually attracted to a man and having no emotional intelligence, almost no emotions, he doesn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you.
And it seems like he tests it out earlier. Like, there's that bathtub scene. Of course, they're like playing chess. It's a battle of wits. And then he says, like, oh, can I get in? And of course, he plays it off like, oh, not with you in it, of course.
Yeah.
But he's lingering. He's watching. Oh, the peeping scene, too, right? And after he kills Dickie, he just sits there with the body and he just holds him. He just holds the dead body and like weeps. And I think maybe even sleeps with him like that.
Yeah, you do see him taking in and like learning things from experiences like that.
And I don't know much about the book, but I believe he's gay in the book as well. And there's a bunch of books.
Oh.
There's more than just one. There's also other Ripley movies. There's like a prequel and there's sequels to it. because he goes on more like adventures and stuff. I don't think they have there's definitely none of the same cast or crew of this movie, but there's like a French one, so it's something that's been adapted a few times with various tones and various truthfulness to the source material. But the author was a gay woman I think in the 50s as well when she wrote this. She was also like a real asshole. So I don't want to be like, oh yeah, she was a lesbian writing novels in the 50s. What a great person. She probably had a hard time, but she was a real piece of shit and wrote Ripley kind of as herself, it seems like. She was like a real womanizer and an anti-Semite and hated everybody and let them know very often.
Oh.
But it does make me feel like maybe then at least there isn't somebody tacking on like, oh yeah, he's evil and weird, let's make him gay too, because those kind of things go together. I don't think that's the case. I think that the author rather was trying to work out some stuff herself.
Yeah, that makes more sense. And also interesting that she wasn't a good person.
Yeah. All kinds of people are assholes.
Yeah.
Gay or straight, you can still be a dick. Oh yeah, we kind of just got right into things. I did have some like thinking about starting off at the beginning about how he's always so close to what he wants, but he can't obtain it. Like he's a piano tuner and he's like playing in the big concert hall and then somebody catches him and he has to apologize. And the only thing stopping him in all of this is just money. Like I think the class system is very apparent in this movie, and there's a lot of commentary on that in not just what we were talking about, how Tom would be very successful if he were in that world, but that seems to be the only thing that's keeping him from success is just his lack of funds. And then when he gets a little bit, he goes a long way on it.
Yeah, that $1,000. And I kind of forgot that it was like the 50s. So that $1,000 is more like $10,000.
Yeah, maybe.
Like it's more. A lot of money for that time. And I think it is interesting the difference between how he and Dickie spend money.
And Dickie spends Tom's money.
Yeah.
Of course, Tom's money is Greenleaf Sr.'s money, but he asks him to buy the icebox and things like that. But then when it comes time to the ski trip, he's like, oh, well, you can't pay your own way. So when Dickie could front it very easily, he just doesn't care. He's just done with him.
Yeah. He's like, on to the next, please. Next adventure.
Yeah. I like it in the beginning because you assume it's just class, financially speaking, that stops Tom from being one of these people. And as soon as he has the coat on, like, everyone trusts him, right? He's given $1,000 just like nothing.
Yeah.
And then as the movie goes on, just as we are forced to identify with him and then start distancing ourselves, we start realizing it's not just class. There is something wrong with this human.
Yeah.
Like how he researches jazz. He's not like, oh, this is cool. He studies it like a text because he doesn't have that capacity to even enjoy it, it feels like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's interesting because he's always grasping for something.
I like when he's studying Italian and the phrases he's saying is, this is my face, this is the face of Dickie. Like that's what it means, what he's saying. You're like, oh, is he a big creep? Yeah, I think he's a big creep.
That's super creepy.
And it's fitting that the song he sings, he does My Funny Valentine, and the first time he hears it, he says, like, I can't tell if this is a man or a woman, the Chet Baker one.
Oh, yeah.
And then that's the song he does, and he doesn't change it. He does it exactly as close as to Chet Baker as he can. He's a mimic. He doesn't bring anything.
Yeah.
He just mimics what he sees around him.
Yeah.
And he goes through the movie and it's equal parts skill and luck. There's a lot of luck. It's not like he's one of those mastermind psychopaths.
No.
He's smart, but he's not doing anything that most people couldn't do if they had the will to do something like that.
Right.
He's not outsmarting the police that much. He's lucky a lot of the time.
And towards the end of the movie, he just keeps having to kill people because they're figuring out. So it's not like he's skirting this big plan and he has like a detailed layout of how things are going to go. He's just like reacting in the end.
There's also that scene on the train. I think that was maybe not the first time, but that's when you realize, like, oh, there's something not good with this guy. Because he's not just smelling Dickie because he loves him. There's something extra. He looks in the mirror or the glass and their faces kind of overlap. So that's when I started thinking, like, oh, he doesn't just love him. I think he wants to be him.
Yeah. It was a bit of a like wear your skin kind of moment.
Yeah.
Where you're like, ooh, this is going somewhere creepy and I don't like it.
Because at first it looks like he's in reflection kissing Dickie.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, I get that. He loves him, but he is forbidden from this love.
Right.
That's something you can understand. And then the faces kind of merge and you realize that there's something else going on. I think this is the second movie that has stolen a scene from Persona, which one day we'll watch. But we're giving you some more fun stuff before we get into Bergman.
Okay, great.
I guess it's just kind of the ending we need to talk about now.
Yeah.
So I did love, what's his name again? Although I've forgotten him.
Oh, Peter Smith Kingsley.
Peter Smith Kingsley. What a name. What a guy.
Rich person name. Yeah.
There's a lot of good rich person names in this.
Mm-hmm.
He's so likable. And there are moments when he's talking with Ripley that you kind of forget what Ripley is. And you're like, I just want them to be happy. And then you're like, oh, no, wait, that's the killer.
Yeah.
And movie, you got me again. You give me flashes of something that you want to cheer for.
Yeah.
You want these two guys who are lonely.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to find solace in each other. But then you realize who Tom Ripley is. And that's not a person we should be cheering for. That is a straight up psychopath murderer.
I did wonder at the beginning of that whole, like, them going away together, if this was like a happy ending.
Yeah.
Which I was like, this is an odd choice that, like, maybe there's going to be a happy ending. But it wasn't a happy ending. It was just like another bad thing happening.
Why do you think he kills Peter?
I think because Meredith is better for him, I guess. Like, he assumes that if he's going to be around Meredith, that's a better situation.
Oh, interesting.
And maybe he doesn't really know what these feelings are with Peter, and he thinks like it's more acceptable for me to be with Meredith. Meredith is also rich, and I think he's like, no, Meredith's like the more correct choice for me then for the next phase or whatever, however long that lasts.
That makes sense if you subscribe to the idea that Ripley is, well, of course he's manipulative, but manipulative with foresight and he's plotting and planning things. Mm-hmm. Then that makes a lot of sense. But I think I just never thought that he was that. I'm not saying he's not bad. I'm just saying he's evil instinctually and not with forethought.
Right.
I had a lot of trouble with this part. I understood why he was doing it. I'm not saying it's the right choice, but I never thought it was unclear in his actions. Like, he kills Dickie, I thought, because things got out of hand. Mm-hmm. And then he finishes it. And he regrets it, but too late. We're moving on. I think he kills Freddy because he's going to be found out.
Yeah.
And he's just saving his own ass, very simply. I never quite get why he kills Peter. I think what you said makes sense, but I think I never really believed that he had that amount of foresight. It makes the most sense, or that he just simply doesn't want to get caught in a lie on the boat.
Yeah.
And he's killing him, and he can get rid of him easier than he can get rid of Meredith and her family.
Right.
That makes sense, but when he's talking to Peter, it's the only time in the movie that he ever seems to have any sort of introspection or self-reflection or emotional intelligence. Because he talks about how there's this room in the basement. He's talking about a metaphor for his mind or his soul or whatever, and you just lock the door and never go in there. And then you meet someone special, and all you want to do is toss them a key and say, open up, step inside. But you can't because it's dark and there are demons. And if anybody saw how ugly it is. I think that is, outside of the voiceover, which starts and kind of finishes the movie, I think that's his truth. That he does want to share with someone. He wants to be wanted, but he also knows that there is this terrible darkness inside of him.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the movie, you can say like, oh, he's just a fun guy going out and just doing whatever. Oh, he's a bit of a trickster. And then as the movie progresses, you can say that he is empty and he's a psychopath and doesn't really have any sort of moral compass. And he would be a great soldier and a great businessman, but you've put him in this kind of love triangle thing, and that is not an environment where he can do anything productive.
Right.
But at this point, I started thinking that this is someone who is evil.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's saying that there's this darkness inside of him. And maybe that was there before the movie starts. Because we don't know what he was doing before that.
Right.
We don't know if he's killed 20 people.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible. And this speech is the first thing that made me think, like, you know what? Maybe it wasn't just he fell into it. I think he fell into this whole thing because of the jacket, and I don't think he planned any of that.
Right.
But it makes me think that he doesn't just fall into killing. There's something in him, and he knows that. And this is the first time he is kind of aware of his own faults. Or maybe he does talk about how, I was going to say he talks about it in the opening monologue, but that actually happens at the end of the movie. When the movie starts, it's him sitting there after having killed Peter.
Right.
That's where it starts. So we get this insight into him about how there's this darkness and he wants to share it, but he knows he can't. I think he kills Peter because Peter has forced him to reckon with this darkness.
Right.
Because Peter is loving and supportive, and I think into him romantically.
Yeah.
That this has come to the surface. And I think it's dismissive if we were to say that when confronted with his homosexuality in someone else who is gay, that it's too much for him and he kills him. Right. I think that's too dismissive of this entire character.
Yeah.
I think it's more that having someone who actually loves him, this thing that he wanted, he thought he wanted, the first time he gets it, he realizes, I can't do this. I can't do love. I can't share who I am because who I am is dark and empty. And seeing this person who is willing to know about me is forcing me to reconcile with how empty and dark I am. And I can't look at that. So he kills Peter because Peter is capable of holding a mirror up to him, not because he's saying, like, look at these bad things you're doing, but because he's saying, you can be yourself around me.
Right.
And who he is nobody. And when he has to reckon with that, when he has to deal with it, he can't.
Right.
Every time he's forced to deal with who he really is, like when Dickie calls him out, he's like, you're a leech, you're boring.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
And he lashes out and he kills him. When Freddy is antagonizing him and saying, like, this place looks terrible, you don't have the taste, you've really made a life for yourself, huh? You just come in here and you're taking everything from everyone else and now you think you know?
Mm-hmm.
He lashes out at him and he kills him. And with Peter, it's the same thing, but in a positive way. He's saying in his intimacy with him that you can be who you are around me.
Mm-hmm.
But who he is nobody. He's just a reflection of others. And when he's forced to deal with that, he lashes out and he kills Peter. The only person who ever really wanted to know who he was. That's what I think. Because throughout the movie, every time he lies, that's an act of self-destruction. When he says, yeah, I'm Dickie Greenleaf, Tom Ripley dies a little more.
Right.
And he goes like, oh, yeah, I went to Princeton. Whoever the real Tom Ripley is dies a little more. And maybe he's being forced to realize that the person that Peter loves is not Tom Ripley. It's this construction I've made.
Right.
Because every
It's
time
not a
he
real
lies,
person.
it's an act of self-destruction. And this is the final one is killing Peter is him killing himself because that's the only person who took the time to try to know him.
Right. And Meredith doesn't care. Meredith's like, oh, you're fun.
Yeah. Meredith doesn't know anything about Tom and doesn't seem like she wants to. She is a very engaging character, but I don't think there's a lot of depth to her. And not saying that it's a bad writing or bad acting. I think that's who the character is intentionally. Yeah. I think that's who most of these characters are. They don't have depth. And I think that's an interesting comparison because we have these rich people who are shallow. And this other person in Ripley who is less than shallow, he's nothing. He is surface. There is nothing below the surface.
He's nothing.
And then he starts talking about that what he wants to do is take a giant eraser and rub out everything, starting with myself. We started the movie with that voiceover. And I always think voiceovers are when you're not hiding something. You are talking directly to the audience. And that's what he starts with. I wish I could erase everything, starting with myself. And then when he kills Peter, we realize that that voiceover is happening at the end of the movie after he's killed 3 people. And the last one, who's someone who may have actually loved him, or at least had potential to do that. And then we get not like an actual scene of him killing him.
No, you hear it.
We get, again, a voiceover.
Right.
And voiceovers are kind of the truth. So maybe the voiceover is saying like, no, he was always a killer. This is the truth.
Yeah.
He was always evil. It wasn't just happenstance. It looks like it, and it was happenstance that got him there. But he was always this evil, dark, empty person because the voiceover is the truth. And then the door closes as he sits after killing him, just staring there.
Because they're on a boat.
Yeah, and the door closes on us knowing anything about who Tom Ripley is.
Right.
He's nobody.
Whoa.
Did that make sense?
It
I
does.
kind of made it off all at the top of my head. Because when we talk, it's when you think and it all makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. Sounds like you wrote a novel first.
My paper says, the more he lies, the more he destroys his true self. And then the rest kind of just happened.
Soliloquizing.
Yeah. And I think that's why this movie is, this movie is not well reviewed.
What?
Yeah. I don't know if I see more into it than the movie actually puts forth. I see all of this stuff there. Or maybe people don't look into it as much. I don't know what it is, but it's not particularly well reviewed. And I think it's so well constructed, beautifully acted. I think there is so much to these characters, even when there's nothing to them. That's even more.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to Tom Ripley.
Yeah.
But I could talk about Tom Ripley all day long.
Forever.
And we kind of just did.
Yeah.
And the direction is beautiful. The music is fantastic. The scenes, the outfits. It's a good movie. It's a very good movie.
There were some very good outfits.
Oh, this is something that I wanted to talk to you about. So we're done, essentially.
Yeah.
But what were some of your favorite outfits?
Oh, see, I didn't keep notes of that. I can't.
Who was the best dressed?
Meredith.
I agree.
Yeah. I did appreciate Marge's like summer vacation looks.
Mm-hmm.
I like that because that's who I aspired to be if we were in Italy at a beach house.
Let's go to Italy and we'll each pick an outfit. I'm going to do one of Dicky's.
Okay.
You do one of those.
Yeah.
We'll look great.
It also reminded me how versatile just like a big white shirt is.
Yeah, that one scene they're all wearing giant white shirts.
And there's a couple of times where she's wearing it with different things. She's wearing it like tied up. She's wearing it over a bathing suit. It just, I was like, man, I should go out and buy a white shirt.
You'd be like Jason Mantzoukas.
Is that all he wears?
He only wears white Oxford shirts.
Huh.
Nothing else ever.
Weird.
Yeah.
Is he like Steve Jobs?
I think in very, very few ways, but in that one, yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we are about done for today. You know what we haven't done in a long time? What's all of our social media stuff?
So you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at ILTYS and the number 2. You can find us on Facebook at I Love This You Should Too -podcast. And if you want to send us a long form love letter, it is I Love This You Should and the number 2 @gmail.com.
I think so. I haven't checked in a long time. Yeah, send in that fan mail.
Yeah, we love hearing from you guys. And we love hearing all your thoughts after the fact.
And you know what else you should send us? Money.
Yeah, please send us all your money.
That should be our thing. If you want us to do a movie that you like, I don't know, just pay us. We'll do it. We have no sponsorship.
No.
We make nothing from this. So we are very cheap. You'd be surprised how cheap. Make us an offer. We'll probably do it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we'll see you next week when I reveal our next theme. And
do we get to know the theme now?
No, because I haven't picked it yet.
Okay.
I was so ahead, and then I just kind of fell off the rails. But I have a few on my list, and I'll just see kind of what goes with what and what we want to do for the week after.
Yeah, 2 things of the fortnight next week, and then big preview.
Watch. Yes.
See you next week, everybody.
Bye.